This is Hauling Success, a podcast that focuses on operational excellence in logistics, diving into the real-world strategies, tools, and insights that help transportation and trucking companies run smarter, grow stronger, and scale with confidence.
Welcome to Hauling Success. My name is Pam Polyak. I am your host, and today we are powered by Amos TMS. So, guess what? We have just celebrated 6 years of yours truly being the owner of Polyak Trucking, the asset-based part of our business. Yay! 6 years. And I'm bringing that up and I'm making that as the core topic of today because I want to discuss what actually happened to us 6 years ago and a lesson that I want everybody to learn from for sure. So just 3 days prior to our signing of the official ownership over from my dad. So back up 2 seconds. My father ended up retiring early part of 2020. We had the party in 2019. We had wanted to officially make the signing of the paper from a legal standpoint halfway through the year for some tax reasons and so on and so forth. So officially the signing of the paper was July 1st of 2020. However, a couple days prior to that, what ended up happening was a owner-operator who was leased onto us totaled his truck in an accident. And to top it off and make it worse, by far, he was drunk when he did that. Yep. We had a drunk driver single vehicle accident in 2020. Now, I'm telling you guys this in a very candid and vulnerable position, but I want it to be a learning experience for everybody else because there was a lot of things that needed to happen. There was a lot of things that happened from a law enforcement standpoint, from an insurance standpoint, and things so on and so forth. So I'm going to kind of walk you through what had actually happened and kind of the lessons that I have taken from it. So bottom line is the accident actually happened late on a Friday night. The driver did not tell us. And this was prior to us having FMCSA, where the automatic notifications of an accident would show up for us the way they do now. So that's the first thing. You can definitely set those notifications now for accidents, emergencies, hard braking, things like that you can get notified of immediately. But in 2020, we did not have that. So lesson one, have the right telematics in place. However, he got into an accident Friday night and did not tell us. So Saturday morning, dispatch received a message from the specific driver just saying, hey, I was in an accident. Can you take me off dispatch for Monday? Never said if it was his personal car. He was a motorcycle driver. Never said anything more than that. It was just, are you okay? Hope everything's okay. Let us know when you're able to come back to work. All right, Monday rolls around, right? I'm ready to get paperwork signed. It was supposed to be signed on a Wednesday at the time. Monday morning rolls around and he shows up in my office with his wife. No idea why he was there, caught off guard, didn't know he was coming, whatever. And he just walks into my office and he says, hey, I was in an accident. Okay, why didn't you tell me? Like my first reaction is like, man, we were supposed to send you a drug test. What happened? I didn't know anything about it. And he goes, well, I took the drug test and I didn't pass. What? What do you mean you didn't pass? Sheer panic started running through my blood. It was a single vehicle accident. He didn't hit anybody. He basically ended up ditching it. It was raining. Obviously wasn't paying attention, drunk, whatever, ended up in the ditch, totaled his truck out. He was taken to the hospital, no injuries. However, there was beer cans in his vehicle. There was open intoxicants and his breathalyzer was well over the legal limit, especially considering you should be at 0 when driving a semi. Now, a couple things. He was not under dispatch at the time. He did not have a trailer. I did not own the truck. He did. So there's a couple things that were put into play with this, and it became very kind of controversial, hot and heavy. difference of opinion between transportation officials, whether it was the state of Wisconsin, OIDA was involved for a little bit, insurance companies, that kind of stuff. So a couple things ended up happening. One, it was the Friday at the end of the month, right? And for FMCSA, information crash data, that kind of stuff, that was the break point, right? At midnight on Friday at the end of the month, it closes to get the scoring for the rest of the month. I was fortunate enough that the police report was not actually done until 4 a.m. the next morning. So it bought me a little bit of time, and I'll explain that as we go through this. So when I received the official police report, it showed that Polyak owned the vehicle, that Polyak was responsible for the truck and the driver, and that the driver was intoxicated, right? So all of those things, straight nerve-wracking, right? It was done in a small town. I had to phone in more favors and more anything that you can possibly think of. I'm calling the police station saying, hey, this police report is not accurate. I do not own that vehicle. The very first thing I needed to do was to get that off of the report, right? So I'm calling the officer who then works third shift. Your days and days go by without confirmation that this police report has gotten changed. I don't own the vehicle. Yes, the DOT number is mine, but I didn't own the vehicle. I don't want this thing in my name. So that was step one in removing that. I was able to get the officer to do it. He agreed. He wasn't under dispatch, didn't have a trailer, yada, yada, yada. I get the valid police report. Okay. Valid good police report. Make sure I turn that into insurance to say, hey, this is what it is. He's covered under his own bobtail coverage, not mine. I don't want any part of this accident on my insurance. But fast forward roughly 2 to 3 weeks later, I look at the FMCSA, and the FMCSA data caught the original report from the police officer. So now I'm in sheer panic. Looking at the FMCSA, the accident's on me, the drug and alcohol is on me, and he got falsification of logs because he was showing as not on duty and not logged in at the time. So all of a sudden, in one accident, I have 3 violations, 3 glaring red flags that I don't want any part of. Because here's the other catch to it. Our insurance renews in October 1st. So usually by July, August, insurance is well on their way to evaluating all of this stuff to make sure that you are insurable. Knowing dang well that I wasn't going to be, step 1 was DataQ the crap out of this thing. What do I have to do? I'll be honest, I ticked off a lot of people, and this is where the persistence pays off a little bit. I probably submitted at least a half dozen DataQs. I was DataQing the crap out of that accident. This thing does not belong to me. I pissed off a lot of people. Ever so much that in the middle of this, the state of Wisconsin decided that I randomly needed a DOT audit. Yay! So now I'm dealing with this accident, but I'm also dealing with a DOT audit at the same time. All in the same month that I took ownership of my family's business. So I'm doing this DOT audit. During this DOT audit, they asked me for the details of the information. This is a part in a lesson that I want you to take away from it. I supplied them with nothing. I simply told them, this is not my accident. I don't have that information. Not my accident. It was not my accident. It was an owner-operator, not under dispatch. Oh, key piece to this too, right? Because we were going back and forth of like, is it? So this is how the DOT in Wisconsin was denying the DataQs originally, claiming that dispatch should have known that he was taking his vehicle home. We're local, so taking his vehicle home was a regular occurrence, is how they phrased it. They also stated that the blurs the lines of what personal conveyance is versus dispatch, right? He didn't have a trailer, he wasn't under a load, and it was a Friday night. He didn't have anything until the following Monday. Now, the help and the hurt to this was that he stopped about I don't know, it was a mile or so from our yard and picked up beer. The beer that he had in his truck, he had stopped at a gas station to pick up. Now, if he would have fueled at that gas station, he would have been on duty and I would have been screwed. However, he did not fuel. He simply went there, picked up the beer, and drove, crashing the truck about 5 miles down the road. So thank the lucky stars that he didn't fuel, because that was kind of the saving grace to what is considered personal conveyance versus on duty not driving. He stopped at that point at a convenience store that sold food. He got cigarettes, he got alcohol, and he decided to leave and drove again. I was able to call my friends at the gas station. I got the video and I told the state of Wisconsin, look, this confirms he was not under dispatch. This is personal conveyance. He was using his truck for personal use. State of Wisconsin originally did not fully agree with me. They asked for his contract, months worth of logs. They dug, and I kept data queuing. Every rejection I kept going. Fun fact, you can keep doing it. Just saying. Not saying it didn't get me an audit, but you can keep doing it. But here's the piece that stuck out. When finally the supervisor for the state of Wisconsin at the time, who's now retired, called me up and said, listen, Pam, what are you trying to do here? I said, I am trying to get this accident off of me. I didn't do this. We didn't know. No, we're up to a renewal. I don't need this drug and alcohol on me. I don't want this accident on me at all. Even the log thing was not us from a transportation and company carrier standpoint. None of these violations were ours. And we submitted the new police report that verified we are not the owner of the vehicle. But in came this huge question about what personal conveyance really is. And if you've ever actually examined the law, it is very unclear, right? It doesn't give you the exact amount of time, the exact amount of miles you can use personal conveyance for. There's very little direct direction on it, I guess, honestly, is what I'm trying to say. There's very little guidance specifically for it. So the state of Wisconsin decided they wanted to take the stance that it was our responsibility because we knew where he was going to go with that truck, meaning we knew he was going home with the truck. Well, I didn't know that. The law simply says if you're carrying a camper or whatever, then that's personal conveyance. Well, he stopped at a convenience store. That determines personal conveyance. So I am on the phone. We're having, after like the 6th or 7th data queue that I decided to do on this accident, the state of Wisconsin called me, the investigator called me and said, what are you trying to do here? I basically said, I don't want this thing on me. And he goes, but you knew he was drunk. I said, I didn't know that. What are you trying to accuse me of, sir? Like, are you kidding me right now? And he said, well, he blew way too high versus when he would have dropped his trailer off, he had to have been drinking on the road. And I said, you can't prove that, and I don't know that. What I do know is that he was done with dispatch. He was off duty. He's used his truck to go home on personal conveyance, and he stopped at a convenience store. Those are the facts that we have at hand. He agreed. Thankfully. Lucky stars, he agreed. He didn't put the accident on us. He didn't put the drug and alcohol on it, and we compromised with the log violation. I dreaded that entire process. It took approximately 3 months for me to get to the point of having that conversation, ticking off enough people, and on top of that, a full DOT audit that was conveniently placed in the middle of that, fighting for our lives 6 years ago. Now, I know that there's a lot of conversation about chameleon carriers and when something goes wrong, just shutting it down and starting over again. And I'll be totally honest. 6 years ago, that was on the table. That was 100% on the table. I did not know how to get out of this situation. I did not know how I was going to be able to be insured anymore without astronomical rates at best. It was going to be a career changing situation, literally months within me taking over, days even. It was so frustrating and so difficult and so hard. And here's the lessons. One, I am so grateful for the people that I had in my corner, from the insurance brokers to the local police officers, to the enforcement, to my team as a whole, who stood by and said, she's stressed to the max on day one. We need to do everything we can to rally around her, to support her, to try and figure this out together, to try and understand, is Polyak truly liable for this? And the answer is no. He wasn't. He was drunk, which is absolutely horrendous. And I thank my lucky stars every single day that there was not another vehicle involved in this accident. And the only thing he hit was a damn mailbox. I can't say that word, I don't think, but it's my show, so guess I can. The only thing he hit was a mailbox. And although I'm very grateful for that, the lesson in the drinking and driving was also a very personal one. I'll be honest, Wisconsin is very known for drinking and driving. Wisconsin is very known for leniency when it comes to drinking and driving. Wisconsin is very known for, it's only up the road there. Hey, you're fine. Just go ahead. Just go ahead. I'll be fine. I can get there just fine. That driver who made that decision to drink in a semi and drive it down the road while my name was on the truck nearly ruined 45 years of a legacy and nearly put out of business over 30 employees. I never personally want to feel that level of responsibility ever again. You will not see me drink and drive. You will not see me personally do it. And I'll be honest, there's probably times, especially in my early 20s, a buzzed drive home from the bar. Okay, I got this, no big deal. Absolutely not. Absolutely not anymore. Absolutely not. I have zero tolerance for it whatsoever. One drink, maybe two, but that's the most. The impact and the hurt and the pain and the anxiety and the hardship that I was faced in trying to save the business because of this one decision will forever change my life. We got lucky. We got very lucky that nobody was killed, that he wasn't killed, that I was able to stay in business. I was able to renew our insurance without the threat of this nasty accident. I was grateful that all our other ducks in a row were well done because this triggered an audit at the same time. And that's very common, especially if accidents, if something, a death happens, you're getting audited. So I had all of that same pressure going on in the first 3 months of owning this business 6 years ago. 6 years ago. So the lessons. Don't let a friend get away with something. We knew he was a drinker. We just didn't know he did it in a truck. We knew he was a weekend partier and did his camping and liked his time off to go party hard. And we knew that. We knew that. We just never thought for a minute it was in a truck. Never thought for a minute it was in a truck. But it's something to be aware of. It's something to blink twice about. If they're willing to go out and party and leave your Christmas party a little bit drunk, what do you think they're willing to do in your semi? It's a hard lesson. It's a tough one. But I will tell you that the pain that it caused is far greater than an Uber ride back to your house and then an Uber ride to go pick up your car in the morning. The lesson of making sure that you have the right people around you, making sure that you have people who are there to help you win are important. I know there's a lot of fear out there in terms of insurance guys are the bad ones. Trust me, I preach on certain parts of it for sure. There's a lot that we can be very angry about when it comes to insurance and rates and things that are going on with that. However, the right broker is the one that stepped up and helped me the most. And I am forever grateful for those team of people. Shout out to the H&I, now bought out by Accusure, but H&I at the time, they truly stepped up and were willing to help in any angle we could, connect me with anybody I could possibly get a hold of to try and get this accident off of our record, and show that it wasn't on us. It truly wasn't, legally wasn't, but it's that blurred line of personal conveyance and what falls under that case. And obviously it got brought up, if you remember, so many, I don't know, it was probably close to a decade ago, I feel like, that big Walmart case on the East Coast where a driver drove his personal vehicle for like 4 hours before getting into a semi and crashing it. Walmart had one verdict and I was about to have the same, and it absolutely just was crushing me in terms of what I needed to do as an owner and what were my options. Then obviously there was a lesson in a little bit of grace towards the idea of new authorities. And obviously I say that with a huge amount of speculation because I was able to fix it without moving on. And I was able to take the little hit that we got off of it and move away from it. However, it was on the table to get a new DOT number and start over again. I feel very conflicted with that right now. At the time, I thought if I didn't get this police report figured out and the state on board with saying it wasn't my accident, there was no way I was going to stay in business. So I close it up and go do something else completely? Or do I start a new trucking company? And the reality is, I wanted to employ the people I still had. We had a good team of people. We have a great team of people. So that idea of starting a new one because of a record, it's got a bad taste in my mouth because of all the fraud that's going on. But I'm being vulnerable and saying there was a real reason why it was on the table. And I could see for other people why it could be on the table. But obviously there's a strong difference between doing things intentionally and doing things shady and doing things fraudulently and that kind of stuff. It just offers a slight bit of grace to the situation to say, hey, there might be some real scenarios in which something happened that was not fair. And because the way our system in transportation works, there was no judge and jury. There was no judge and jury to this. It was me having a conversation with the state of Wisconsin Transportation Agency. That's it. If I couldn't convince him, if it was me and him, if I couldn't convince him, then that's it, right? We would have been done. There was no jury I could put this in front of to explain. There was no ticket for it. It was just, this is where you're at. And so there's a little bit of grace to that when we talk about the chameleon carriers and the people just closing down one and opening another. I'm not saying a lot of grace, and I'm not saying I would have been proud of it and stood it on a pedestal if I would have done it. But I definitely thought about it. It was a strong contender on the table of how do we get through this, and understanding where we were at and what was going to happen next. It was very real. So it gives it just a little twist and a lesson of new authorities and understanding why people do that. Obviously, if there was an accident and there was a death and there was things like that, it's a lot of the pressure of understanding that one driver can change the entire company. We are not a bad company. He was a bad driver. There's a big difference, and understanding that and realizing that the Department of Transportation lumps us together, meaning one bad driver and firing him doesn't change my record, which honestly I think is really unfair. if you have a bad driver who even gets an out of service for a tire or something stupid, but you decide to let him go because of that behavior or speeding ticket, that should come off of your FMCSA record. There should be some level of grace to say, hey, that driver did something poorly on his own accord and we took action as a company, and therefore I don't want to be docked for this anymore. Obviously, we've got bigger fish to fry in a large way, but it's just something to think about from the FMCSA standpoint. That would be great to see. Hey, this driver chose to speed. He got a ticket. It's falling under unsafe driving. I let him go. It should come off my record, right? That would have been the easy solution to this accident. He got into an accident. It was horrible. He did something extremely foolish, extremely intentional. There's zero excuse for it. He was fired. He was let go. Done. Why is it still on my record? But that's a rant, I guess, for another day. But big lessons in all of that, and understanding that the people that you employ hold a level of responsibility, and you need to also monitor and watch them. Monitor and watch and understand and dig into and pay attention to what they're doing and their behaviors. And I'm not saying that I noticed anything, because I didn't see anything. He was a local driver. Yeah, I've met him plenty of times. I knew him. I knew his wife. I knew who they are. But that doesn't mean that I knew he was drinking in a truck. Trust me, there would have been zero tolerance for it then, but even more so now, in terms of how I know things would have changed if I wasn't able to pull the tricks out of my hat to make it work. The other piece of that, and the lesson in all of this, is make sure you are always DOT compliant. Make sure that you are always DOT compliant, because you never know when they are going to come knocking on the door. They will come knocking, and accidents do happen, and it doesn't take an accident to get an audit, but they will come knocking, and you need to make sure that you are always DOT compliant. If you need help with that, shameless plug, my consulting business does that. We offer mock DOTs for transportation companies. You'd much rather pay me a couple $100s to get that DOT done than to pay the government thousands. It's a very serious thing that you need to make sure that you're doing with your team on a more regular basis. Have them feel the pressure of supplying the stuff within 24 hours. Have them feel the pressure of, hey, you need to send this to us in 72 hours. We need this information, and we need all of it. And don't skip anything. Do you have all of these files? Do you have all these things together? We were able to get a zero violation DOT audit in the middle of fighting an accident. But I'll also give a lot of credit. Again, H&I, one of their team members, told me flat out, don't give him anything on that accident. They specifically wanted things on that accident. You're admitting that you have the information when technically you're trying to fight that it's not your accident. Make sure you're clear on what those boundaries could or couldn't be, and you've got people in your corner to help make sense of that. Also, DataQ. If you have inspections, if you have accidents by default, 9 times out of 10 go to you as a carrier as being at fault. You have to DataQ them. You have to prove that you were not at fault to accidents that you weren't at fault for. So make sure you are DataQing those events. In inspections, guys, the driver's saying, it's just a warning. It's just a warning. Cool. DataQ it. Especially if it's a BS warning, especially if it's one that isn't suffice, especially if it's one that doesn't make sense, if whatever the case is. Accidents can be DataQ'd, so can inspections. Make sure that you are doing everything you can to advocate for yourself, because those numbers then translate to our wonderful world of insurance. They use the FMCSA data, as crooked and as crazy as some of that stuff might be, to then supply your rates. If you are just shamelessly looking past all of that, not DataQing, not showing what it is, and not telling the story of what happened with your inspections, your crashes, anything like that, you need to make sure that you're doing that. You need to be double checking those systems in place so that you as an owner are diligent to what you're running into and what things you need to fix, and then have that story ready for when insurance renewals start coming around. And certainly have your information ready for your DOT audit. So we made it 6 years. I made it 6 years. Unfortunately, that reunion, it feels a little tainted because every year it brings up a lot of emotion with this accident and what's happened and what's changed and the growth that we've had since then, and understanding what information we legally need to have, from handbooks to driver handout to manuals to drug testing to the things that may have been overlooked at certain points. Obviously, the first 3 months of my 6-year ownership so far were some of the worst, especially in fighting the whole COVID at the same time. So yeah, I definitely had my work cut out for me, but I appreciate you all listening to the story, and I really hope you guys learn some lessons from it, understanding that there are people behind the wheel who also make poor decisions, but that doesn't always mean that the business owner is poor. That doesn't always mean that the entire business needs to suffer. You just have to know how to fight the good fight. So I wish you all the very best. Message me if you need any help, and especially if you need a DOT audit done. Take care, everyone. Bye.